Kurt Russell says leaving Hollywood for ranch life 40 years ago wasn't about getting away, it was about living life on his own terms. The Avengers Endgame star opening up to people in an interview published May 30th about leaving Los Angeles for Colorado, where he and partner of 40 years Goldie Hawn own a log cabin lodge.
At 75, Kurt Russell finally said the thing about Val Kilmer that most of Hollywood spent 30 years too scared to admit. The man the industry branded impossible, difficult, and unhireable was, to Kurt, someone completely different. So, what really happened between these two on the chaotic set of Tombstone? And why did Kurt stay quiet about their final meeting for so long?
Kurt Russell has cried after finding out the tragic news of Val passing away after it was confirmed in the press. Val's final public appearance was supposed to be a special one, but instead, it became a heartbreaking moment no one saw coming.
What did Val confess in that last conversation before his voice gave out for good? Join us as we expose the truth about Val Kilmer that Kurt Russell kept close for decades. The day two future legends first crossed paths. Back in 1983, the set of the drama movie Silkwood was busy. A young actor named Val Kilmer hung around the set because he was dating the singer Cher at the time. He was only 22 years old, straight out of acting school, and desperate for work. He had not filmed Top Gun yet. He was nowhere near playing Batman, Jim Morrison, or Doc Holliday. He was just an ordinary kid with a massive ego and way more ambition than the average 20-something. What a lot of fans forget is how serious Val was about the craft from the very start. He had been the youngest person at the time accepted into the drama division at Juilliard, and he carried that intensity onto every set he ever walked onto. He studied, he prepared. He treated acting like a calling, not a paycheck. Kurt was already a real name by then. He had played Snake Plissken. He had charm, presence, and years of experience that the younger man simply did not have. So when these two crossed paths for the first time, nobody watching could have guessed they would end up tied together for the rest of their lives. But Kurt noticed something about the young actor right away. He later said he could tell Val was a guy who was very serious about what he wanted to do. Val's strong focus stayed with him throughout his career. He didn't worry about being easy to work with. He just wanted to be great. He questioned everything, argued about scripts, and insisted that every scene was important. Some directors saw this as a big advantage, while others found it frustrating. In 1983, on that busy movie set, he seemed like a kid being difficult. He was a young actor who took himself too seriously, and an older star admired him for that. The two did not become instant friends because life pulled them in different directions for years. Val exploded into a massive star while Kurt kept building his own reputation. They circled the same industry without ever actually working together. The timing was wrong. A full decade passed before they finally ended up on the same project. It was not a calm or easy shoot. It turned out to be one of the messiest productions in the entire history of Western movies. What began as a broken film with no clear leader would somehow create one of the greatest on-screen partnerships fans had ever seen. The Westerner nobody thought would survive. By 1993, the plan was simple. Tombstone was supposed to be a great American Western based on the story of lawman Wyatt Earp and his gunslinging friend Doc Holliday. Kurt Russell took the role of Wyatt. Val Kilmer played Doc, a charming gambler slowly dying from tuberculosis. On paper, the movie looked like a guaranteed hit. In reality, the entire production began to fall apart before the crew even set up the cameras. The original director, Kevin Jarre, also wrote the script, but he was fired early in production and replaced by George P. Cosmatos. For a few terrifying days, the cast reportedly did not even have a director at all. They were stranded out in the Arizona heat, burning through money with a massive ensemble and no clear hand steering the ship. This exact situation usually kills movies. The production had a massive cast, a giant budget, high pressure, and absolutely nobody running the show. The crew was completely exhausted from a brutal schedule out in a harsh desert. Most films in this position just collapse, fade away, and end up as expensive disasters that never hit theaters. Instead of letting the project bleed out, the cast refused to give up. They still believed in the script and each other. Kurt Russell allegedly stepped directly into the chaos and started holding the entire project together, even though nobody paid him to direct. The sinking ship desperately needed a captain, and he quietly took the wheel. The studio executives were terrified they had an expensive flop on their hands. They quietly dumped the movie into theaters with almost zero early press screenings. That is usually the universal sign that a studio has completely lost faith in its own project. Everyone on the crew braced for a total disaster. Nobody predicted that a chaotic, broken production would somehow turn into one of the most famous westerns ever made, with fans still repeating the lines decades later. Val Kilmer went all in on playing Doc Holliday. He realized the character was a walking corpse who used jokes to hide his own tragedy. He brought a strange, intense energy to the set that stole every single scene. He essentially turned a terminally ill gambler into the coolest guy in the whole story. That level of dedication was the only thing keeping the broken production afloat. However, the real disaster was happening behind the scenes. Because the person who really pulled Tombstone back from the edge was not the credited director at all. The secret about who really directed Tombstone. For years, fans thought that George P. Cosmatos directed Tombstone because his name is printed right there on the credits. But Kurt Russell eventually told a very different story that completely changed the history of the movie. According to him, he secretly directed the entire film himself, and the studio only brought Cosmatos in as a frontman to keep the peace on set. The way Kurt tells it, he did not want anyone to know he was running the show. He was the star, not the director, and making that public could have caused chaos with the studio and the crew. So he allegedly worked it out privately. He would map out the shots and the plan, and the credited director would carry it out. It was an open secret on set that grew into one of Hollywood's most debated behind-the-scenes legends. Here is the part that matters most. Val backed him up. Years later, Val said his co-star was responsible for the film's success, and described Kurt as essentially directing the picture. For two actors who were known to have strong opinions, that level of agreement says a lot about the trust between them. Kurt has spoken warmly about how in sync they were during all of it. He said the two of them were always in cahoots, always thinking the same thing, always pulling in the same direction. That is rare on any film, let alone one that was actively falling apart. While everything around them was burning, Kurt and Val were a two-man team who simply understood each other. Not everyone remembers it identically, and that is fair. Some cast members have said Kurt never personally directed them, so the full truth is probably somewhere in the middle. But almost nobody disputes that Kurt was the glue. He kept morale alive. He kept the vision steady. And the partnership he built with Val became the emotional heart of the finished film. Yet the same fierce intensity that made Val brilliant also made him one of the most feared names in the business. Because of this, Val had a reputation that nearly destroyed his career, and Hollywood was not kind about it. The man Hollywood loved to hate. The entertainment world frequently disseminates negative narratives, and to understand the significance of Kurt Russell's support, fans must reflect on Val Kilmer's enduring battle with his public image. The criticism was severe. as the press branded him difficult to collaborate with, while numerous directors asserted they would never cast him again. And one prominent magazine even released a cover story dubbing him the actor Hollywood loved to dislike. The director of Batman Forever publicly called Val childish and impossible. And Val was famously not asked back to play Batman, with George Clooney stepping in. Another director once joked that there were only two things he would never do in life, and working with Val again was one of them. That is the kind of thing that follows an actor around forever. On paper, the rumors looked terrible, but the tabloids completely ignored the actual cause of the drama. Most of the on-set fighting happened because Val Kilmer cared too much about the script instead of too little. He insisted on talking through every single scene, analyzing the characters, and fixing mistakes. A few directors actually liked having an actor who cared about the work. Most directors just wanted him to shut up, stand in the right spot, and say the lines. That exact clash is what created the myth of the impossible celebrity. Kurt Russell never claimed Val Kilmer was an easy guy to handle. He openly admitted the actor was complicated, but his experience working with the man was completely different from the tabloid gossip. That reputation ruined his career. As the years went on, the major studios stopped calling, and the movie projects got small and cheap. An actor who once played Batman and Iceman suddenly found himself pushed completely out of the industry. Part of that came down to bad luck, but mostly it was the toxic label that followed him to every single set. The gossip columns in Las Vegas and Los Angeles are vicious, and the industry already decided he was a villain. That statement carries a lot of weight for someone the entire entertainment industry blackballed. It shows that the labels of a difficult genius mostly came from people who refused to actually talk to him. Kurt Russell actually put in the effort. He ignored the gossip and looked at the actual person. He found a guy he genuinely liked, despite all the flaws. The exact traits that made other directors angry turned out to be the main reason the two actors bonded. And nowhere did that bond show up more than on a wild trip across Europe that fans never got to see. Concrete head and wicked sense of humor. Once Tombstone wrapped, Kurt and Val had to promote it, and that meant traveling together. Kurt brought along his longtime partner, the actress Goldie Hawn. What followed was the kind of memory that sticks with a person for life. The three of them flew across Europe together, with Kurt, who is a real licensed pilot, actually flying the plane himself. It was on that trip that the real friendship showed itself. Kurt has fondly recalled how Val had a sharp, almost acidic sense of humor that not everyone appreciated, but that the two of them bonded over. Val could be relentless with the jokes and the talking, to the point where Kurt sometimes needed a break, just to recover. Kurt has laughed about telling Val to take Goldie out to dinner, so he could finally get some peace. He once joked that he could not hear one more word out of Val's mouth. It was not anger. It was the kind of exhausted affection you only feel for someone you actually love being around. The humor was constant, and it was the glue of their whole friendship. Val even had a nickname for him. He called Kurt Concrete Head, because Kurt was so firm and stubborn about his ideas and his approach to the work. Coming from anyone else, that might sound like an insult. Coming from Val, it was a sign of respect and closeness. These were two strong personalities who had found a way to genuinely enjoy each other instead of clashing. This is the side of Val that the public rarely saw. Not the impossible diva from the tabloid stories. Just a funny, loyal, intense friend who made the people close to him laugh until they were tired. The world got the headlines about the conflict. Kurt got the road trips, the jokes, and the late-night laughs. He got the real Val. But the voice behind all that wit, and all those legendary lines was about to be taken away. Because what came next would silence one of the most quoted actors of his generation, possibly forever. When the voice went silent. In 2014, Val Kilmer received terrible news. Doctors told him he had throat cancer. The treatments he went through were very harsh. He had strong chemotherapy and 2 surgeries to help him breathe. By the end of these surgeries, his throat was so damaged that he could hardly use his vocal cords. The actor known for his smooth and confident voice as Doc Holliday was left with just a weak and painful sound. For an actor, the voice is everything, and Val had to learn to live without his. He sometimes used a voice box to communicate, and he opened up about the long battle in a memoir and a deeply personal documentary about his life. His own son even read his written words aloud in the film, because Val could no longer perform the narration himself. It would have been easy for him to disappear completely. A lot of people would have, but Val was never built that way. In 2022, he made an emotional return to the screen, reprising his role as Iceman in Top Gun: Maverick, the sequel to the movie that launched him. Because his voice was so affected, technology was used to help his character speak. Audiences understood the weight of that scene immediately. The situation came full circle as the arrogant young pilot from 1986 turned into an older man dealing with a brutal illness, and the studio forced that real-life tragedy directly into the script. For longtime fans, seeing Iceman back on screen felt completely bizarre. For the audience, was not just watching a fictional character anymore. People were looking at a real-life survivor who refused to give up, even though his own body completely betrayed him. The entire comeback worked because Val Kilmer stopped hiding from the public. He let the audience see him at his absolute worst, ruined voice included, instead of retreating into isolation just to protect his old movie star image. For a guy who spent decades facing accusations of having a massive ego, that move required serious balls. Younger viewers who only knew him from toxic internet headlines suddenly discovered a real artist. A completely new generation fell in love with a talent that was present the entire time. Through the whole ordeal, the people closest to him noticed the same thing. The cancer stole his voice, but it completely failed to break his actual personality. Kurt Russell insisted that even when speaking became a massive physical struggle, Val Kilmer never lost his sharp wit or his sense of humor. The body fell apart, but the stubbornness remained entirely intact. Because the goodbye Kurt shared with Val is something he held quietly in his heart for years before he ever said it out loud. The last goodbye Kurt kept to himself. A few years before the end, Kurt went to visit Val at his home. Neither of them knew it at the time, but it would be the last time they ever saw each other. Val was frail, and it was hard for him to talk, yet he still found a way to be himself. He still had wonderful things to say, and he still had that fairly good sense of humor that had carried him through everything. Then came the moment Kurt would carry forever. The two friends just looked at each other, decades of history hanging in the air between them. And Val, being reflective about his whole life, said something Kurt has never forgotten. He admitted, "Sometimes I could have been a little bit nicer to a lot of people." And then he laughed. That single line conveys more about Val than any headline ever could, for it was honest and self-aware, while also being funny in a quiet, knowing way. It depicted a man reflecting on his entire career, all the conflict and all the reputation, and gently admitting that he was human. There was no bitterness in it, but rather acceptance and warmth, along with that signature humor right to the end. On April 1st, 2025, Val passed away from pneumonia at 65 years old, surrounded by family in Los Angeles, leaving behind his 2 children, Jack and Mercedes. After years of fighting, the actor who refused to be counted out finally found rest. The tributes poured in from all over the world, but one voice carried more weight than most. When Kurt finally spoke about his friend, he did not focus on the gossip or the so-called difficult years. He talked about the whole person. He said everybody has their full 360 degrees and that nobody gets out of this life alive. Then he offered the simplest, most loving line of all. He said if anybody deserved to rest in peace, it was Val. That is the truth Kurt Russell waited until 75 to fully share. Not a story about a problem star, but a goodbye to a misunderstood friend. Do you think Val was misunderstood by Hollywood? Or was that difficult reputation actually earned? And should Kurt have spoken up for his friend a lot sooner? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.